Hey, good morning, everyone. All right, so let's have a quick recap on the things what we have already seen. So we have started with what exactly it means by a query. So let me take a quick revision before I could start with the static SQL queries. See, whenever whenever you want to fetch something directly from the database, and we know one thing about Salesforce, that Salesforce is that technology. Along with the front end, you also have the back end part. That means every backend, I mean, if you have something in the front end, like if you have an object particularly, for that object, there's a table inside database.com. There's a table inside database.com. So this technology is absolutely connected with front end and back end. Salesforce is a complete package. So when we know this, like we have our own database, something called as a database.com. And then every object what we see in the front end, like if you let me try to make a login first of all. So every object what we see in the front end, just give me a moment. Let me enter your passwords because I almost forgot what is a password for this particular org. Your batch is 208. All right. Yes. So I was talking like every object what we see in the front end is actually a database table, is a table in the database.com. So all of these objects, what you see like account and the cases, leads, opportunity, or your custom objects like hiring manager, positions, candidate, whatever you have created and what is already being there. So they are the objects, they looks like to be the object tabs in the front end, but they are actually a table in the back end, right? A table. And whenever we wanted to fetch something directly from this table, the database.com, we have to make a use of something called as queries. Now, Salesforce have its own way of firing query, its own way of query language. This query is called as SOQL, Salesforce Object Query Language, because this query, what we are seeing, what we are going to study can be applied. It can only be applied on the Salesforce object. And nowhere else you can use this query. The query have few more forms, like if we talk about Oracle, other databases. So they also have this, but they have something called as SQL. Now, SQL stands for Structured Query Language. And in most of the cases, it is used. In most of the cases, SQL is used. Whenever we interact with database, whenever we deal with database, in most of the cases, SQL is used, structured query language. But this does not happen. This is SQL does not going to help you out in Salesforce. Why? Because Salesforce have its own database. The data of Salesforce, whatever data we are generating, we are consuming, that is not going to get stored in any another place rather than Salesforce database.com itself, right? So this is the reason, this is the reason why SQL we don't use in the Salesforce. Rather, we use our own customized query language, and that is SOQL, Salesforce Object Query Language. Now, I have also given you this format. Acha, one thing which is very important, every one of you, every one of you should remember this format. Every one of you should remember this format. This is very important. This is very important. The first thing is, what is the format? Whenever I'm writing a query, how to write it down? Whenever I'm writing a query, how to write it down? So the first statement, what you see, select. Every SQL query, it always starts with select. In fact, there are few things I could say is common between SQL and SOQL, structured query language, and Salesforce object query language. There are few things which are common, which is used in a way it was used in the SQL as well. Mm, and SQL always starts with select, like your SOQL, the SQL structured query language. It also starts with select. So there are few things which are absolutely common in place, but otherwise there is a lot of differences between SQL and SOQL. All right. Anyways, so every SQL query, it always start with a keyword called select, and then you will have to mention what fields out of an object, what fields in terms of tables, what column names we wanted to fetch. Then from the object. To select, give the name of the fields here, from, and give the name of the object from where you want it. This is the basic format. This is the basic format. But I mean, as and when we move on, we will going to use something called as clauses. Clauses. So all this, what you see, like where, group by, having, order by, limit, offset, these all are the clauses. Give me a moment. So these all are the clauses. These all are the clauses. What is the purpose of a clause? We are going to study them all, right? They serve, every one of them serve a different purpose. So where is used for something else, group by and having, order by, they are being used for something else. The more important to understand is the sequence, this sequence, like where, and second is group by, the third is having, the fourth is order, the fifth one is limit, like this. So if you are using some of them, all of them, whatever, if you are using some of them, for example, you are using, let's say, limit, you are using, let's say, order by, and you are using where. All right. See, I mean, we will use all of them, is a very rare case, but whenever we would fire a query, we would design a query to get something from the database. To filter out the records, we're going to make a use of clauses. These are clauselet clauses. Now, for example, I am using, out of all these clauses, I am using in my query, I'm using 3 of them, where, order by, and limit. So when I'm using where, order by, and limit, I'll have to follow the sequence. Where always come first, then come order by, and then come limit. All right. I cannot do it like this, like I first have written limit, or I have written order by, and then I will be writing where, or maybe I'm writing like what, group by, order by, whatever. So you cannot change the sequence. If you wanted to use them, you'll have to follow this sequence. You'll always have to follow this sequence. So if the sequence means, I mean, if here it has been written that where is going to come first always, then it would be always where. If you are using where along with limit, limit is not going to first. Limit is always going to come later after where clause. If you are using where, limit, and all rows, then all rows would always come after limit. Where would come first. You cannot make any shuffling of sequence over here. Thus, that I wanted every one of you to understand, that you cannot make a shuffling of the sequences. No, it's not possible. The sequence is absolutely, fixed. If you would try to do it, I'm going to show you that as well. We're going to get some errors in this case. All right. Chalo. So I guess, and there were a few governor limits, what we have also covered, like in a single transaction, in a single program, we could maximum execute 100 SQL queries, not more than that. Like if I talk about DML, You could maximum execute 150 DMLs. In the same way, in a simple in a single program, you could maximum have 100 SQL queries, not more than that. Now, one SQL query is capable to fetch, to retrieve, to get 50,000 records. If you would fire an SQL query, it can fetch up to 50,000 records from the database. What if I wanted to fetch more than that is a question that we are going to cover in the later topics, particularly asynchronous programming. You will be going to learn something called as a topic called asynchronous programming. There would be 3 to 4 things into that. And then we will going to see something called as a batch program. So using a batch program, we could even fetch up to 50 million records. That's a huge capacity. It's beyond the imagination. That's a very huge capacity. So we're going to see even that as well gradually. But right now, you'll have to learn about these governor limits that I could maximum have 100 SQL queries in a program, not more than that. And my one SQL query could fetch up to 50,000 records. All right. And there were a few of the best practices that we are always going to follow. I'm going to talk as and when they are being created. Now, SQL queries are of 2 types. Let's now start with today's topic. Everything so far I was discussing was the topic I have already taken, right? I've already, while I was introducing you this topic in the last session, I have taken all this. So I was just trying to revise the things. But now let's start with today's topic. So SQL queries are of 2 types, static and dynamic. Static and dynamic. Now let me start with static one. I'll also going to cover the dynamic in the coming days. In the later topics, we are also going to see the second form, dynamic queries. But right now, let me start with the static query. See, every static query is always written whenever you are writing an SQL query. Whenever you are writing an SQL, static SQL query particularly, it must always be written, it must always be enclosed. It must always be put within the pair of square brackets. The pair of square bracket means opening and closing a square bracket. So whenever compiler would interpret this, whenever compiler would see an opening and a closing square bracket along with something that has been put inside, it would automatically understand this is a static query. This is a static query. Now let me try to show you few of them. All right. So all right, I'm going to take this as well, but let me take it to the Salesforce. Now see, there are a couple of the ways you could execute an SQL query. Inside the program, we are going to see them. Of course, I have written that in the notes as well. How many ways you could execute the SQL queries. So there are multiple ways to do that. Like inside the program, I'm going to show you in the upcoming days how you could insert a query inside the program would be a topic. And of course, we are learning this SQL query because we wanted to use them inside the programming. Our ultimate aim, why we are learning the query, because we wanted that inside in my program, I wanted to fetch certain data I wanted to fetch, and that is the basic reason. So we would definitely going to work on this. This is our ultimate goal. We are learning this query, SQL queries, because I wanted to use them inside the program. So of course, this is going to be a topic. Well, you know what, we are going to cover this later on. But right now, if I could skip that, point number 2, I have 2 more options. I could use a query editor, or I can else use a Salesforce inspector extension, which I have told you is the most convenient way. So I first of all would show you a query editor, like using a query editor, how you can fire a query. See the results. And then we're going to see Salesforce Inspector, and most of the time we are going to use Salesforce Inspector only. Okay, so what is a query editor? Let me try to show you that. So to find out this extension query editor, you first of all would have to go to the developer console. Now inside in your developer console, let me just try to close everything. Okay. So we have this, we have so many tabs over here, like you have logs, you have test checkpoints. You also have query editors, view states, progress, problems. So this is a tab called query editor. Now this is a place where you can write down your SQL or SOSL queries. SOSL is also a form of query, Salesforce Object Search Language. You're going to learn this as well in the coming days. All right. So I could write down a query over here. For example, I'm writing my query like select. Let's say ID, let's say name. Let's say active underscore C. Let's say phone. Let's say fax. I would be fetching this everything from account. Now see, understand the format first of all. Every SQL query must always be start with select. Must always start with the select. Select. After that, I have given the name of all those columns, all those fields for which I wanted to see the data. Then from, select from, and then give the name of the object. So I am giving the object name as account. Now, why I am not enclosing this within a square bracket? Why I'm not enclosing this into square bracket? The reason behind this, whenever you are using a query in a program, when you are writing this in a program, you're going to learn that as well. Then you'll have to enclose it within square bracket. Right now, inside the query editor, and of course, as well as in the Salesforce Inspector, we can write it down directly. All right, we can write it down directly. Let's see. So once you have written this query, press this execute button. Press this execute button, and this is the result. This is the result. How many query result? Total number of the rows. That means how much data have been fetched. With using this query, how much data? Total number of records that has been fetched is 138. 138 records have been fetched. Like if I would go to the accounts, and if I would click onto this all accounts, how many records are there? There are 138 records. So all of the records have been fetched by the query. And does we get every data? I mean, every field data? No. Whatever we have mentioned, like ID, then name, and then active status, then phone, the value of phone, the value of the fax. That is what we have got. So out of this record, which particular field record you wanted to see, you have to mention it over here. Like, let me try to show you something. Like if I would say, if I would write down another query, like let's say select, let me give ID, first name, comma, last name, email, phone, fax, industry, from, let's say, contact. All right, let's say contact. I'm not sure whether contact have industry or what. Let me take it. So I have given this query, select ID, first name, last name, email, phone, fax from contact. Now, if I would execute this, so I'm going to see this data. See ID, first name, last name, email, phone, fax, right? And this is coming up from where? This is coming up from contacts. So how much record have been fetched? Total 141 record. So this is one way to fire a query and see the results over here. But let me try to show you the one which is more efficient, So instead of firing a query, I mean, it's the examples what you are going to take. Don't do it onto the query editor, because see, query editor requires your typing effort. You'll have to write down everything over here. Now, for example, let me show you one more difficulty. If I wanted to fire a query, let's say on contact or on hiring manager position, I must know the field's name, right? Like, just I have written all of them. I must know the field's name. You can see first name, last name, everything. But let's say if there is an object for which I don't know what's the field name. So what I have to do? So I first of all would have to go to, like, and there are two places. Either, for example, I wanted to fire a query on position. So I'll first of all have to go to the position object and then view fields, right? This way I can do, and I can, like, I can write down, like, select, let's say, ID and the name, because they are standard fields. ID, name created by, last modified by, owner, this is going to be present in every object. So there is no ambiguity in that. But apart from this, there are other field names which I don't know. So I'll have to come over here like this. And let's say I'll have to include API names. You always have to include the API names. So I'm writing like candidate name. And then comma. What is the next? Maybe I wanted to see this value, right? So I'm write down, I'll have to copy like this, comma, or else I'll have to HR email ID this week. So see, this is like, an extra overhead when you don't know the name of the fields. You'll have to follow it like this. You'll have to follow it like this. You'll always have to follow. And from even the name of the object is the API name. Always take the API name, position __ C. Why __ C? For every custom entity. Salesforce always append __ C. If it's an object, if it's a name of an object, if it's a name of a field, if it's a custom, you're always going to see this _. C. Now I'll execute this. I will execute this, and you are going to see the result like this. There are 12 records altogether. There are 12 records, and this is what the data is going to popping up like this. So we have identified one difficulty over here. What is that? Let me give you this command. Now you can unmute yourself. Tell me what you have identified. We have identified one difficulty. While if I would be trying to fire a query, if I would, for my examples, if I'm using a query editor to design a query and execute that query and see the result, we have identified one difficulty. By the way, what is that? Yes, you can share your opinion over here.
Sir, finding their API name.
Yes, you always have to find out their API name, right? So this is one of the difficulty, I guess. Now let me try to show you the more efficient way to do this. Like before Salesforce Inspector, I'll always, in my previous batches, I have only shared them. I have only show them a query editor, like the way you execute it right now. But after this extension has been, after this extension, I know this extension and I've started using. I have started in my batches. I started teaching both of them. Now let me show you the same thing, firing the query, but with the use of a Salesforce Inspector. So you have this small, like, draggable component, and so now there's a button called as data export. All right. So when you make a click over here, data export, it would automatically take you to this page like this, And then in your case, this is going to be come up blank like this, because I executed so many queries. I always used to have the last query, whichever I have executed, it has stored them in the cache memory, and that's why it was popping up like this. But anyways, now see how to efficiently use this. I'll show you that way. First of all, write down select, write down from, and write down the name of the object. For example, I wanted to get the things from the position. See, I just have type POS, and all of those objects where this POS could be a possible match, days, POS, POS. You see, but I wanted to see, I want to get the things from position. So I have selected position. Oh, I just have to make a use. Now come back over here, give us space, what you want, what you want. Like if I would type an ID, or rather if I don't type anything, see, just, do you see this? Do you see this small plus icon over here? This one, right? All right. See what I'm going to do. I just make a click over there, and these all are the fields of position object. You simply don't have to type anything. You can simply select it. You can simply select them. And all of them seems to be like in hyperlink, like, all right. Or else the first, that was first thing, first help, or ID. If you type like ID, if you type like N, so it will going to give you all the matching things like NA. You can take it like this. EM, email. All right. Understand this. This is like, candidate count, contact number. I can take everything from here. HR email ID already have taken HR. All right. And what else I can take? Minimum budget, number of vacancies. You just have to click. You just have to click. And once you include the last, once you have include, I mean, the last field, it always come like a comma. It always come up like a comma. Like for example, passport required. This is my last field. Now I have made my selection. I don't want it to include any more field. So because it has a comma over here, you have to remove it manually. All right. You have to always remove it manually. Delete that comma. And once you have concreted your SQL query, just press this export button. Guys, give me a moment. Just give me a moment. Excuse me. All right. So, guys, if this would end automatically, I'm going to share one another link. I guess I have make a wrong login. Uh, yes, I have make a wrong login. No, yeah, it's coming up like this only. License version. All right, I'll see to this later on. See, so this is the, see, if you would observe now, this is the most convenient way to design and fire a query. Actually, we would only use this to design the query and cross-verify the result, because query, we always use it inside program. But at least to construct that query and to see the intermediate result, Salesforce Inspector is a very good thing. All right. Now, for example, this query I have written it, I have written it onto the position object, onto the position object. Let me try to show you, like, if I would select, for example, ID, see, this is the name of all of the objects in the Salesforce. It had listed out everything. For example, I wanted to fetch something from the candidate object. So I just have written this and it has given me that help. Okay, what are the probable matches for this? So I wanted to get the things from the candidate. So I'm writing like ID and then name. And then, for example, the location, the contact number. I'm just selecting it from this list. And let's say current CTC, and email ID and expected CTC. That's it. Or maybe like PAN number, or maybe like passport number, position applied, But once I have make all those selection, I'll just remove this last comma. I'll make it exported. So you can see this is the result, and this result we are getting it directly we are getting it from the database. So basically for designing the query and to see the result, Salesforce Inspector is the most convenient way to use it. So for today, what you have to do, I guess every one of you already have installed the Salesforce Inspector. And now see, we're going to talk if what happens if Salesforce, if the query would return multiple records and everything. We're going to see this and this programming part also. But let me try to give you few of the examples for today's practice. Oh, this one, everything. See, everything, right? For example, write an SQL query. I'll just going to take this one, the first one I'm taking. You have to solve all these examples today, but on the Salesforce Inspector, I wanted all of you to solve this, right? Tomorrow, I would be taking you to this topic. What happens when the query would return a single record, and what would happen when a query would return multiple records, right? We're going to talk about this because ultimately we are going to take this query inside the program. But today, for today's practice, I wanted every one of you to solve these many number of the queries from your notes. For example, write an SQL query. Why N? It should be A. Write a SQL query. Everywhere it's N. Write a SQL query to fetch the account ID, name, rating, industry, annual revenue fields from the account object. All right, from the account. So how I'm going to do this? So I'll go with for example select. All right, I'll go with like select. All right, what it has been taken from which object? From account. So even before writing the fields, first write down from where? From the account. And then write down what are the fields that are mentioned. What if they wanted to fetch? ID, name, rating, industry, annual revenue, right? So I'll be including them. ID, name, rating. See, every time, every time I write down, the help automatically come over. Annual revenue. And let's say fax. Let's say phone. All right. Let's say active status. Let's say the value of industry. Let's say the value of ownership. All right. So likewise, you can design a query and just press on this export button. You're going to see the result. You would going to see the result. See, this is the result of ID, name, rating, annual revenue, fax. And let me tell you a few more things before we could end up today's session. See, now the good part of this, I mean, not just firing the query. Actually, Salesforce Inspector do a variety of things. Now, once you get this data, you could even copy this. You can copy this for Excel and for JSON. JSON is JavaScript object notation. You're going to use this. We're going to understand during our integration. After development, the third module would be the integration from my side only. So in the integration, I would be telling you the significance of getting the data inside JSON format. So we're going to talk later, a bit later on to this. But at least for now, you can copy this in the form of CSV, comma separated value, or in this plain Excel. Both of them are going to open in the Excel. Let's say I have copied this. In the Excel. And now even I could export it like this. I could export it like this only. So once I just have open, I'll press Control V over there. And see, let me just try to formatize a little bit. So this is how it does looks like to me. The whole data, you can even, export this. You can copy in the form of Excel or CSV, whatever you want. And here you could, for example, I don't want it to see this column. I can just delete it out. All right. I can like this only. I can even sort it out. You wanted to sort it. You can even sort it like from A to Z. You can even sort it like this only. So this is basically like what you can perform beyond the getting just data, beyond just filing the query into Salesforce Inspector and getting the data. You can even perform operations like this. So that is what is a benefit of using Salesforce Inspector. So by today, I wanted every one of you to go with all these examples, and make yourself comfortable by firing a query onto the Salesforce Inspector. Make yourself comfortable with this. So by tomorrow, I'm going to take you a little more ahead of this, because we wanted to fire this query. We wanted to write down the query actually inside the program. We're going to create the classes and then methods inside the classes. And then there we are going to write down the query. So for that particular scene, we're going to, discuss about what happens when query returns only one record, how you're going to handle this in the program. And what happens, by the way, if the query would return you multiple records. So how you're going to handle this in the program, inside the program, because right now there is no question. My query is returning me multiple records. Like, for example, in this case, it has exported 138 records. So even my query could return one record only. My query could also return one record like this. So right now, this is not a question for us because we are looking into the Salesforce Inspector. But inside the program, it actually makes a difference. When query is supposed to return only one value, like one record, just one record, one random record. I could make this like, abhi to selection was random. I could even make it more precise. Hum aage padhne wale hain, kaise? And what would happen like if your query would return multiple records? How would you going to handle this in the program? So this is something which makes a difference inside the program. That's why we are going to discuss this on by tomorrow. But आज के दिन आप सभी लोग Salesforce Inspector पे query fire करो, result देखो, and if you wanted to see multiple examples, more than this, just try to get something from the Google as well. Otherwise, 5 to 7 examples is more than enough because ये सारी चीजें हम आगे भी करने वाले हैं. I guess this much is sufficient for today, right? Okay. Now tell me if you wanted to ask anything. Yes, you have any questions in the mind? Just let me know that. Please ask me if you wanted to know something more about this. No questions? Fine. Thank you so much for joining then. I'll meet you by tomorrow morning, same time, same link. Oh, I could change the link. Thank you so much for joining. Bye.